Good morning. I have a short statement that I'd like to make as we start the new year. Fellow Kenyans, indeed, as our children settle back in school after the December holidays, and as all of our 2019 KCPE candidates report to their respective secondary schools in our second year of 100% transition, I would once again wish to convey my best wishes to all Kenyans for the new year. Issue of removal of the interest rate cap, you will recall that the law capping interests in Kenya came into force in 2016 and set the maximum lending rate at no more than 4 percentage points above the central bank rate. This law was introduced following a public outcry against the high cost of credit. The implementation of the law was expected to lower the cost of credit, but also to increase access to credit. Unfortunately, the law had the opposite effect on the economy and reduced the amount available for credit. The removal, therefore, of the interest rate cap in November last year will facilitate the availability of more credit to businesses, which it will in turn increase the circulation of money. And at this point, I urge the Central Bank of Kenya to use the full range of instruments of regulation and policy at its disposal to prevent predatory lending and to ensure that banks can offer loans at affordable interest rates. My sixth intent for the next few months is political. We must give ourselves a different political template if we are truly to prosper and not be dragged down every single day by never-ending squabbles. Every so often, I believe, a nation must come together. We in Kenya have done so in Lancaster in the 1960s, leading to the Lancaster Consensus. We did so in the 80s, leading to the removal of Section 2A. We also did the same in 2008. And I believe it is time now also for a new consensus. And this is the aim and objective of the BBI process. In this process of renegotiation, no voice will be wrong, and all must be heard. The process must be inclusive, and it should spell, fellow Kenyans, an end of ethnic majoritarianism, and I believe an end to the winner-take-all politics. Fellow Kenyans, we are on a path, I believe, to end the cycle of election crises, and that is the only way we can win our battle of economic prosperity. And I want to assure all Kenyans, for me, I am not against any single person, but I am for 47 million Kenyans to take the next step forward. I believe that the above actions are just but the beginning, and we will be conversing again in a few months' time. And I want to be held accountable for delivering on the intentions that I have declared. And I want every leader in our country, at every level, to stand and work to make the lives of our people better and indeed much more hopeful. So going forward, I have directed the National Treasury, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Attorney General to finalize and gazette the newly developed Tea Regulation 2019 within the next 2 weeks. These regulations include establishment of the Green Leaf Pricing Formula Committee to determine the formula for pricing of green leaf. Further, the establishment of a self-sustaining stabilization fund to cushion farmers against price fluctuations and ensure implementation of guaranteed minimum returns, the establishment of the Kenya Tea Council and the regulation of the volumes of tea sold through the auction and through direct sales, direct contracts, to be set at 80% and auction at 20%. Fellow Kenyans, the same problems of governance, conflict of interest, and scrupulous buying methods that have bedeviled our tea sector are also very similar to those in the coffee sector. The Coffee Task Force, which I established in 2016, has completed its work, and I am aware that the recommendations have not yet been implemented. So today again, I direct the Ministry of Agriculture to immediately implement the task force recommendations. In addition to the above measures for the coffee sector, I have directed the National Treasury to immediately operationalize the 3 billion shilling Cherry Revolving Fund within the next 30 days to cushion farmers from delayed payments and enable them to access finance to meet their daily cash flow requirements while awaiting payments for their produce. I further direct the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, as well as the Ministry of ICT, to ensure that public service vehicles, the hospitality industry, meaning our hotels, as well as all our broadcasters, including yourselves, meet all their obligations in paying the required tariffs. This will be a basic requirement for renewal of any business licenses for broadcasting houses, matatus, hotels, bars, and other such premises. I believe these new measures will see the rise of tariffs collected and will create immense savings on the processes of collecting royalties. It is estimated that the new system will see an increase in collection for our musicians rise from a previous 200 million shillings per year to an estimated 2 billion shillings per year, a tenfold increase that should see our music industry blossom. Fellow Kenyans, my third intention for the next few months is to provide support to Kenyans afflicted by natural disasters such as the recent floods and the ongoing locust invasion. The unusually heavy rains that have hit the country last year resulted in heavy flooding and landslides, which in turn has caused at least 40 fatalities, displacement of families, loss of livestock, and also health risks. Most counties in the coast, eastern, northeastern, North Rift, Mount Kenya, Western and Nyanza, amongst others, were severely affected. So my administration, in conjunction with development partners, has mobilized funds, asante sana, has mobilized funds and made available 5.2 billion shillings to provide relief food supplies, undertake a resettlement program for displaced communities, support reconstruction of homes that have been destroyed, address health concerns, and reconstruct critical infrastructure, including water supplies. I am indeed closely monitoring the implementation of this disaster recovery operation to ensure that affected households are able to regain some stability as soon as possible. If you have any concerns about the implementation of the program, I would encourage you to share it with your county administration. Fellow Kenyans, with regard to Kenya's health insurance, I am aware of the proposed changes in the fees and structure of insurance benefits by the NHIF. And given my administration's commitment to providing affordable health care, I am today directing the Ministry of Health to immediately halt the implementation of this proposal to allow for further consultation. My fourth intent, fellow Kenyans, speaks to the issue of corruption. Fellow Kenyans, I want to renew my pledge to you on this fight. I will not turn to the left or right. I will not soft pedal or back pedal, nor be intimidated. I will make no covenants with evildoers, neither will I show mercy to those who rig our markets in order to enrich themselves. The primary thrust of that strategy shall be economic. And it's for the reason that the economy is what we want to be a much more important focus than politics. And this is because our practice throughout our history as a country has been one of pursuing the political kingdom as opposed to the economic kingdom. But it is my strong belief that that focus has been wrong. And it is for this reason that we still have remnants of poverty despite years of progress that we have made. Political power, pursued for its own sake, will not make Kenya a great nation. We must therefore use politics to shift the economy and indeed to address the plight of the most vulnerable members of our society. We need to use politics to better the livelihood of our fellow Kenyans. If we use politics as a means to a greater end, we will give politics meaning, and that is my intent for this year. I today seek the indulgence of our judiciary. And I do so because I strongly believe that no administration in the history of this country has prosecuted corruption cases the way I have done. From ministers to governors, senior government officers, procurement officers, I have been on the front line. And since I respect the principle of separation of powers, I have no power of convicting the accused. We have done our part, and I will continue to do so. Now the judiciary should give us convictions as an indication that we are winning this war. And to that extent, I think it is a shame on our country that we prosecuted a case against drug traffickers in our country and we couldn't get a prosecution. And within a year of them being arraigned in the United States, they have been jailed for no less than 25 years. That is something that our judiciary should come to terms with. Over the next few months, as I said towards the end of last year, I shall be coming to you with further actions. This work will be carried out by the framework I established last January in 2019 to coordinate and to expedite the implementation of programs and projects with potential to transform the lives of our people. This framework, outlined in the Executive Order Number 1 of 2019, provides a structured one government approach to the implementation of national government programs and is intended to enhance efficiency, speed of delivery, and reduce wastage and leakage of public resources. I am indeed pleased to note that under this framework, major progress has been made in unblocking various constraints to delivery, streamlining processes, and fast-tracking implementations in areas such as cargo logistics, contracting, local content in procurement, and processing of payment for works of goods procured by government. I take this opportunity to thank all those cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, regional and county commissioners, and all administrators, and indeed the private sector and other stakeholders who have worked as a team to deliver on these key milestones. So therefore, going forward, and in line with the strategy I have outlined above, and in order to continue enhancing service delivery and make it more efficient, more focused, and better to the Kenyan people, I intend to make certain changes and reorganize government as follows. I have moved the State Department of Cooperatives from the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade, Enterprise Development and Cooperatives to the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, and renamed them as the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development, the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives, to allow for better management. I have moved the State Department of Youth Affairs from the Ministry of Public Service, Youth, Gender, to the Ministry of ICT and Innovations, and renamed them as the ministries as the Ministry of Public Service and Gender, and the ICT as the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. I have also made the following nomination for consideration by the National Assembly. 1, the Honorable Mutahi Kagwe as Cabinet Secretary for Health. Ms. Betty Maina as the Cabinet Secretary for Industrialization. Ambassador John Weru as the Principal Secretary for Trade. Dr. Juan Ouma as the Principal Secretary for Vocational and Technical Training. Ms. Mary Kimonye as the Principal Secretary for Public Service. Ambassador Simon Nabukwesi as the Principal Secretary for University Education and Research. Mr. Solomon Kitungu, Principal Secretary for Transport. Mr. Enoch Mumanyi Onyango as the Principal Secretary for Physical Planning. I have also today reassigned duties of Cabinet Secretaries and Principal Secretaries as follows. 1, Ambassador Rachel A. Omamo as the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs. Ms. Cicely K. Kariuki as the Cabinet Secretary for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation. The Honorable Peter Munya as the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Ambassador Dr. Monica K. Juma as the Cabinet Secretary for Defense. Mr. Simon K. Chelugui, the Cabinet Secretary for Labor. The Honorable Ambassador Okur K. Yatani, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Planning. Mr. Joe Okudo, the Principal Secretary for Sports. Dr. Chris Kipto, the Principal Secretary for Environment and Forestry. Dr. Kevit Desai, the Principal Secretary for East African Community. Dr. Margaret W. Mwakima, Principal Secretary for Regional Development. Ms. Esther J. Koimet, Principal Secretary for Broadcasting and Telecommunications. Mr. Peter Kaberia, the Principal Secretary for Mining. Ms. Safina Kwekwe, Principal Secretary for Tourism. Professor Coletta A. Suda, Principal Secretary for Gender. Finally, fellow Kenyans, I have made appointments of the following as Chief Administrative Secretaries: Hussein Dado, the Chief Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government; Patrick Olentutu, Chief Administrative Secretary for Labor and Social Protection; Andrew Twimur, Chief Administrative Secretary for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation; Abdul Bahari, Chief Administrative Secretary for Devolution and ASAL; Lawrence Karanja, Chief Administrative Secretary for Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development; Peter Odoyo, Chief Administrative Secretary for Defense; Maureen Magoma Mbaka, Chief Administrative Secretary for ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs; Winnie Gushu, Chief Administrative Secretary, the State Law Office; Wavinya Ndeti, Chief Administrative Secretary for Transport; Zakaria Kinuthia Mugure, Chief Administrative Secretary for Education; Mumina Bonaya, Chief Administrative Secretary for Education; Lina Chebi Kelimo, Chief Administrative Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives; Anne Mukami Nyaga, Chief Administrative Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives; Mercy Mwangangi, Chief Administrative Secretary for Health; and finally, Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, Chief Administrative Secretary for ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. I would want Kenyans to note that 7 of these appointments to the position of Chief Administrative Secretary are young Kenyans, some below the age of 30. These Chief Administrative Secretaries, I hope, will work and indeed understudy their more experienced colleagues in government with the aim of readying themselves to assume senior leadership positions in the near future. I expect that these young trainee ministers, so to speak, will be a model to all their fellow young people and also instill, preach the high ideals of patriotism, excellence in public service, and most importantly, integrity. I congratulate each and every one of them for this appointment, and indeed, I look forward to working with all of them. Today, I direct the Ministry of ICT to work with stakeholders to resolve the legacy issues that have plagued rights holders for decades in this country. I am pleased to note that already progress has been made and arrangements have been reached between all the key stakeholders. Indeed, the MOU that was signed on the 20th of December last year proposes a range of measures that will ensure genuine right holders are appropriately compensated for their compositions. Regarding content service providers, my intention and intent is to support the sector using multi-pronged approaches. One, the current sector structure, which comprises of content service providers who work with digital platforms such as Skiza and Viusasa, will be eliminated. And this is because they sit outside the collection management organizations. My practical direction on this is to have all right holders register on the National Rights Registry. To receive royalties, content service providers will be required to channel all payments of royalties through a single, centrally managed account at the Kenya Copyright Board. And this will enable oversight by the regulator and ensure that the collection and distribution accounts are easily auditable. The Kenya Copyright Board, with the assistance of the Ministry of ICT, has already reviewed and agreed on the tariffs for 2020. These tariffs are to be gazetted and will form the basis on which compliance will be monitored. So therefore, in this regard, I direct the Ministry of ICT in consultation with the Attorney General's Office to ensure that this new tariff structure is gazetted within the next 30 days. Further, I direct the Ministry to remove conditions requiring digital platforms to only work through licensed content service providers. This will enable musicians to work directly with platforms such as Skiza.